Parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector, specifically in Luke 18:9-14. Here is the story of the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. To some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, "God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give a tenth of all I get." But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, "God, have mercy on me, a sinner." I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. In this parable, Jesus contrasts two individuals who come to the temple to pray. The Pharisee. A Pharisee was a member of a religious group known for their strict adherence to religious laws and traditions. In his prayer, the Pharisee stands by himself and expresses his self-righteousness. He thanks God for not being like other people, particularly evildoers and the tax collector. He boasts about his righteous acts, including fasting and tithing. The tax collectors were often despised in society because they collected taxes for the Roman Empire and were viewed as collaborators with the oppressors. The tax collector in the parable stands at a distance, unwilling to even lift his eyes to heaven. He humbly beats his chest and cries out for God's mercy, acknowledging himself as a sinner. The verdict: Jesus concludes the parable by stating that it was the humble tax collector who went home justified before God, not the self-righteous Pharisee. He emphasizes the principle that those who exalt themselves will be humbled, while those who humble themselves will be exalted. The parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector conveys several important lessons. The danger of self-righteousness and spiritual pride. The value of humility and recognizing one's need for God's mercy. The idea that external acts of righteousness do not always reflect the condition of the heart. The assurance that God responds to the humble cry for mercy and forgiveness. This parable serves as a reminder that true righteousness comes from a humble and repentant heart, rather than from self-righteousness and a judgmental attitude toward others. The parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector offers profound lessons about humility, self-righteousness, and God's response to different attitudes in prayer. Various interpretations highlight different aspects of the parable's message. Here are some common interpretations. 1. Humble versus self-righteous prayer. The central theme of the parable is the contrast between the humble, repentant prayer of the tax collector and the self-righteous, prideful prayer of the Pharisee. It underscores the importance of approaching God with humility and recognizing one's need for His mercy. 2. The danger of self-righteousness. The parable warns against the peril of self-righteousness and spiritual pride. The Pharisee's prayer reflects a mindset of superiority and judgment over others, a mindset that Jesus criticizes. It emphasizes the need for self-examination and a focus on one's own shortcomings rather than condemning others. 3. The Pharisee's attitude. Some interpretations focus on the Pharisee's attitude and actions. His prayer is seen as a representation of religious legalism and a checklist mentality, where he boasts of his good deeds. The parable teaches that God is not pleased by such an attitude. 4. The tax collector's repentance. The tax collector's repentance and humility are highlighted. His posture of standing at a distance, beating his chest, and confessing himself as a sinner is a model of genuine repentance and humility. The parable underscores God's response to such a heart. 5. The role of mercy. This interpretation emphasizes the central role of God's mercy. The parable illustrates that it is the tax collector's plea for mercy that results in his justification before God. It underscores the idea that God responds to genuine humility and repentance with mercy and forgiveness. 6. A warning to the religious elite. The parable can be seen as a warning to religious leaders and the self-righteous who look down on others. It cautions against hypocrisy and the belief that one's religious status or actions make them superior to others. 7. The justification of the humble. The parable assures believers that God justifies those who approach Him with humility and a contrite heart, while those who exalt themselves will be humbled. 8. A call to true worship. Some interpretations extend the parable to emphasize the importance of authentic worship and an attitude of reverence in one's approach to God. It contrasts ritualistic or prideful prayers with sincere and humble worship. These interpretations collectively underline the parable's core message of humility, repentance, and God's response to different attitudes in prayer. Different Christian denominations and theologians may place varying emphasis on these interpretations based on their theological perspectives and teachings. The parable serves as a timeless reminder of the importance of a humble heart in one's relationship with God.